Blood trickled down James Morrison's temple as 4 gang members surrounded the 69-year-old veteran, mocking him. None of them knew he once commanded America's deadliest Special Forces unit. Only his wife recognized the look in his eyes. The Arlington Veterans Memorial Park stood quiet in the late afternoon sun. Granite monuments gleamed, each etched with names of the fallen. American flags fluttered in the gentle Virginia breeze, creating a sacred rhythm against a backdrop of distant traffic. James Morrison walked slowly beside his wife Sarah, his weather hand holding hers. At 69, his posture remained military straight despite his age, shoulders back, chin level, eyes alert. His faded Navy veteran's cap bore a small Delta Force insignia, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. Sarah, 67, wore a simple blue dress, her silver hair tucked neatly behind her ears. They came every Thursday, a pilgrimage to honor James' fallen comrades. Under his arm, he carried a folded American flag in the tight triangle military personnel use at funerals. It had draped the coffin of his closest friend, Captain Thomas Reynolds, killed in action 15 years ago. In James' pocket rested a Purple Heart medal, his own, earned in a mission the public would never know about. Across the memorial ground, 4 young men loitered near the central monument, their laughter cut through the respectful silence like broken glass. The leader, Derek, broad-shouldered with tattoos climbing up his neck, spray-painted something on the memorial stone. His friends, Mike, Jason, and Curtis, surrounded him, laughing and keeping watch. An elderly couple nearby hurried away. A mother pulled her curious child closer. No one intervened. The park, usually a place of reflection and respect, suddenly felt dangerous, tainted. James noticed immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he continued walking with Sarah toward the memorial wall where Thomas's name was engraved. Can you believe they let these war criminals have their own park? Derek's voice carried deliberately loud across the memorial grounds. He shook his spray paint can, the metallic rattle echoing off stone surfaces. Mike, built like a linebacker with arms covered in crude tattoos, laughed and slapped the memorial wall, fighting rich men's wars and then wanting special treatment. Sarah gripped James' arm tighter as they approached, her eyes fixed on the defaced memorial. Bold red letters now marred the sacred stone. Baby killers. James felt his heart rate remain steady, a trained response to threat assessment. His eyes scanned each gang member methodically, distances, positions, potential weapons. Derek, leader, switchblade in back pocket. Mike, physical threat, brass knuckles visible. Jason, thin, nervous energy, likely quick. Curtis, quiet, hanging back, most dangerous, calculating. Excuse me. Sarah's voice was soft but clear, her years as a military nurse evident in her calm authority. This is a memorial for fallen soldiers. Could you please stop defacing it? The 4 men turned, surprised that anyone would address them. Derek's face twisted into a mocking smile. Well, look what we have here. Grandma's defending dead soldiers. He stepped closer to Sarah, deliberately invading her space. You know what these monuments really are? Propaganda. Your husband probably killed innocent people for oil companies. James remained still, watching, assessing. Memories flashed. Fallujah, Kosovo, places without names. 42 years of service compressed into milliseconds of calculated patience. Sarah stood her ground. These are people who gave their lives. Please show some respect. Jason, the thinnest of the group, circled around them. Respect? For what? Government puppets. Hey, check out Grandpa's hat. Mike pointed at James' cap. Delta Force? You serious? His laughter was sharp, theatrical. Playing dress-up with the real soldiers? Derek stepped closer to James, eyes dropping to the folded flag under his arm. What's this? Your security blanket? Before James could respond, Jason snatched the flag from his grasp. The perfectly folded triangle came undone, the stars and stripes falling open. Nice souvenir, Jason taunted, dangling the flag. Bet this makes you feel special. Park goers watched from a distance, phones emerging to record the confrontation. No one stepped forward. No one helped. James' voice, when he finally spoke, was surprisingly soft. Return the flag, please. Something in his tone made Jason hesitate. It wasn't fear or anger. It was absolute certainty. Derek noticed a wavering and stepped forward, grabbing the flag from Jason. Or what? Oh man, you'll bore us with war stories. He examined the flag, noticing the embroidered name. Thomas Reynolds? Your boyfriend. Sarah inhaled sharply. That flag draped his coffin. Derek's eyes lit with cruel delight. He found a nerve to strike. Then he won't mind this. He threw the flag to the ground and deliberately placed his boot on it, twisting his heel into the fabric. The desecration was calculated, meant to provoke. James didn't move. His breathing remained measured, his stance unchanged. But something shifted in his eyes, a coldness that veterans of certain operations would recognize as deadly focus. The Purple Heart, too. Curtis spoke for the first time, his voice unervingly calm as he pointed to the outline in James' pocket. Let's see it. Mike stepped forward and roughly shoved James, catching him off balance. The metal fell from his pocket, clattering on the pavement. Curtis picked it up, examining it. Awarded for wounds received in action, Curtis read mockingly. What happened? Grandpa? Paper cut filing military reports. James glanced at Sarah, their eyes meeting briefly. A silent communication passed between them, the kind only possible after decades together. She stepped back slightly, understanding what might come next. Last chance, James said, his voice still calm. Return what isn't yours. Derek laughed and kicked the flag toward him. Come get it, Delta farce. Derek ground his heel harder into flag, the fabric tearing slightly under his boot. This is what I think of your friend and all the other sheep who died for nothing. Around them, a few more bystanders gathered, phones recording. A teenage boy whispered to his friend, "This is messed up." James looked down at the flag, Captain Reynolds' flag. His mind flashed to Thomas's funeral, his widow accepting the folded triangle, her fingers trembling. The sacred ceremony of honoring sacrifice. You know nothing about sacrifice, James said quietly. Curtis flipped the Purple Heart medal like a coin. $20 for this at a pawn shop. Mike laughed, emboldened, probably fake anyway, like his service. James' right hand flexed slightly, an imperceptible movement to most, but Sarah noticed. 43 years of marriage had taught her to read these microsignals. Derek, sensing James restrain his weakness, stepped closer. At 6'2", he towered over the older man. What unit were you really in? Stolen Valor. Cafeteria Force. James remained still, his eyes never leaving the flag on the ground. Answer me, old man. Derek shoved James' shoulder, harder this time. James didn't stumble. He absorbed the push as if it were nothing more than a breeze. Respect the flag. James said, each word measure precise. Derek laughed and spit on the flag. Make me? Something changed in the atmosphere, a tension that made birds stop singing and onlookers hold their breath. James' stance shifted minutely, his weight redistributing in a way only trained fighters would recognize. You had your chance, James said. Curtis moved first. The quiet ones always do. He circled behind James while Derek continued his taunting. Sarah saw it coming, but couldn't warn her husband fast enough. The metal pipe Curtis had concealed in his sleeve connected with James' temple. The sound was sickening, dull and solid. Blood immediately began flowing from a wound. Several onlookers gasped. Someone shouted, "Hey!" A woman dialed 911. James staggered but didn't fall. The blow would have dropped most men half his age, but decades of combat conditioning held him upright. Blood streamed down his face, soaking into his collar. For a moment, he seemed dazed, eyes unfocused. Derek laughed triumphantly. Not so tough now, are you, soldier boy? Sarah moved toward her husband, but Mike blocked her path. Stay back, Grandma. Your hero's getting a reality check. James blinked twice, his vision clearing. The pain was compartmentalized, an old skill from interrogation resistance training. His mind flashed to Kandahar, 1993, Fallujah, 2004, places where he'd endured worse and still completed the mission. James, Sarah's voice carried concern but not panic. She'd treated too many battlefield injuries to lose composure now. Derek kicked the flag again, while Curtis readied another swing with the pipe. Mike moved closer to James, brass knuckles now fully visible on his right hand. "Old man thinks he's tough because he killed some farmers in Vietnam," Jason taunted, pulling out a switchblade. "Let's see how tough you really are." James straightened to his full height, blood still flowing down his face. He looked at each attacker in turn, cataloging distances, weapons, vulnerabilities. The tactical assessment was automatic, ingrained from thousands of combat situations. A strange calm settled over him. The park, the onlookers, even the pain in his temple, all faded to background noise. What remained was crystal clarity. "Sarah," he said quietly, "step back, please." She recognized that tone, the same one he'd used before every dangerous deployment. She moved away, not out of fear for herself, but knowing what would follow. "Last warning," James said to 4 men surrounding him. "Put down my flag and the medal and walk away." Derek laughed and motioned to the others. "Let's teach this old-timer what real pain feels like." Nobody saw James' first move. It was too efficient, too practiced to register in real time. One moment Derek was advancing with clenched fists. The next, he was on one knee, gasping, wondering why his arm was bent at an unnatural angle. James hadn't struck him. He'd simply redirected Derek's own momentum, adding a precise application of pressure to the elbow joint. The sickening pop echoed across the memorial grounds. "What the—" Mike charged forward, brass knuckles raised. James pivoted slightly, his body angled to reduce target area, a movement so subtle yet so effective that Mike's swing connected with nothing but air. Off balance, Mike couldn't defend against James' response. A short, sharp strike to the solar plexus that collapsed him instantly. 2 men down in under 4 seconds. Curtis, seeing his friends fall, swung the pipe again with vicious force. James ducked with surprising agility for his age, the metal whistling harmlessly above his head. Before Curtis could recover, James had closed the distance between them. "Special forces don't train to fight," James said quietly as he caught Curtis' wrist in a grip that felt like steel. "We train to end fights." A precise twist, and the pipe clattered to the ground. James followed with a palm strike to Curtis' sternum. Not hard enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to send him sprawling backward, struggling for breath. Jason backed away, switchblade extended. "Stay back, man." His earlier confidence evaporated as he watched his 3 friends neutralized by a blood-covered senior citizen. James moved forward methodically, his footwork balanced and efficient. No wasted motion, no dramatic gestures, just a mechanical precision of someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of close-quarters combat. "The flag and medal," James reminded him, voice still eerily calm. Jason lunged with the knife. James sidestepped, caught Jason's wrist, and applied pressure to a nerve cluster that made the young man's fingers involuntarily release the weapon. A sweep of James' leg, and Jason joined his friends on the ground. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 20 seconds. Onlookers stood frozen, phones still recording. The violence wasn't theatrical or showy. It was clinical, precise, and all the more terrifying for its efficiency. James knelt slowly and picked up the American flag from the ground. With practiced movements, he began folding it properly, triangle after triangle, with the reverence the symbol deserved. Derek, cradling his dislocated arm, stared in disbelief. "Who the hell are you?" James didn't answer. He continued folding the flag, his movements ceremonial despite the blood still flowing from his temple wound. Curtis, wheezing as he tried to stand, pointed at James. "You broke Derek's arm." James finally looked up, his eyes cold. "He's lucky. In my active days, he wouldn't get up again." A chill ran through the gathered crowd. This wasn't bravado or empty threatening. It was a simple statement of fact. Derek struggled to his feet, rage overriding pain. "You're dead, old man." He charged, leading with his good shoulder like a battering ram. James didn't retreat. He pivoted slightly, using Derek's momentum against him, a fundamental principle taught in Delta Force close combat training. With minimal effort, He redirected Derek's charge. The gang leader crashed into the memorial wall with a dull thud. Mike had recovered enough to attempt another attack, swinging wildly with his brass knuckles. James blocked the strike with his forearm, not on the knuckles themselves, but at Mike's wrist, neutralizing the weapon's effectiveness. In one fluid motion, he trapped Mike's arm, turned his hip, and executed a textbook hip throw. Mike hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Curtis and Jason approached simultaneously from different angles, a coordinated attack that might trouble an ordinary fighter. James, however, positioned himself to keep both in his field of vision, controlling the engagement distance with small adjustments to his stance. Curtis feinted left while Jason attempted to flank right. James recognized the tactic instantly. He taught similar maneuvers to special operations teams in 3 different conflicts. When Curtis committed to his real attack, James was ready. He deflected the punch with an economy of movement that spoke of thousands of hours of training. Curtis's fist missed by millimeters. Before he could recover, James struck a precise hit to the vagus nerve that sent Curtis dropping to his knees, disoriented. Jason hesitated, witnessing his friends defeated with clinical efficiency. His hesitation was costly. James closed the distance with surprising speed for his age, entering Jason's personal space before the young man could react. No punches were thrown. James simply secured a compliance hold, 2 fingers applying pressure to a nerve cluster near Jason's elbow. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. The metal, James said quietly. Jason fumbled in his pocket with his free hand, retrieving the Purple Heart. James took it and released the hold. The 4 gang members regrouped, bruised and humiliated but not seriously injured. James had calibrated his response perfectly. Enough force to neutralize the threat, not enough to cause permanent damage. An older bystander whispered to his wife, "That's not street fighting. That's military close-quarter combat." Another man nodded. "Special forces. Has to be." The crowd had grown larger, drawn by the commotion. Phones captured everything. But the atmosphere had changed. What began as rubbernecking curiosity had transformed into something like reverence. A middle-aged man in a business suit stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, are you all right? You're bleeding." James nodded slightly but remained focused on the 4 gang members, who were now backing away, nursing various injuries. A woman approached Sarah. "I've called an ambulance." Sarah smiled gently. "Thank you, but he won't go. Trust me on that." An elderly veteran in the crowd suddenly straightened, his eyes widening in recognition as he stared at James. "Wait a minute, Morrison? Colonel James Morrison?" The name rippled through the gathering. A younger veteran's jaw dropped. The Desert Storm Delta commander? Silver Star recipient. Derek, still clutching his arm, looked confused. "Who?" The elderly veteran stood at attention, a reflexive response. One of the most decorated special operations commanders in modern history. Led the rescue of hostages in 91 that's still classified. He turned to others. What he did in Somalia alone earned him the Distinguished Service Cross. James ignored the comments, continuing to fold the flag with meticulous care. Each triangle precise, each fold deliberate. "I saw him receive the Silver Star," another bystander added. The citation mentioned extraordinary heroism, but gave no details. Curtis, the most observant of the gang, studied James with new understanding. "You're actually him? For real?" James didn't respond. The flag now properly folded, he retrieved his Purple Heart medal from the ground where Jason had dropped it. Sarah moved to her husband's side, taking a tissue from her purse and gently wiping blood from his temple. The wound was still bleeding freely, but James showed no sign of discomfort. Derek looked increasingly uncertain. "We didn't know." "It wouldn't have mattered if you did," James finally said. "The flag isn't about me. It's about them." He gestured toward the memorial wall. Derek, despite his injured arm, wasn't ready to concede. Pride and humiliation formed a dangerous cocktail in his eyes. "You think you're something special because you killed people for the government?" He spat, voice trembling with rage. "You're just an old man who got lucky." James looked at him steadily. "There's no luck in combat, only preparation and decision." Derek glanced at his friends, a silent signal passing between them. All four began spreading out, circling James despite their injuries. This time, they moved more cautiously, having learned that rushing the old veteran was ineffective. The crowd tensed. Someone shouted, "Leave him alone!" But the gang members ignored the call. James assessed the situation with calm detachment. For opponents, various injury levels, attempting to coordinate. He calculated angles, distances, timing, battlefield mathematics that had kept him alive through decades of conflict. "You should walk away," James said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had given similar warnings to more dangerous men in more dangerous places. Curtis, recovered from his earlier incapacitation, pulled something from his jacket, a small canister of pepper spray. Mike had picked up a rock. The situation was escalating again. James glanced at Sarah, a lifetime of partnership condensed into a single look. She understood and backed further away. When they attacked, they came from all sides, having learned from their previous failure. Curtis leading with the pepper spray, Mike flanking with the rock, Derek and Jason approaching from behind. What happened next seemed impossible to the onlookers. James moved with a speed and precision that defied his age, ducking the pepper spray, sidestepping Mike's swing, and somehow maintaining awareness of Derek and Jason behind him. The entire encounter lasted 7 seconds. When it ended, all four gang members were on the ground again. This time, James had been less gentle. Curtis lay face down, arm twisted behind him in a controlled position. Mike was on his back, struggling to breathe after a precise strike to his diaphragm. Derek cradled his dislocated arm, now also sporting a bloody nose. Jason remained conscious but immobile, paralyzed by fear as much as pain. "Stay down," James instructed quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was professional advice. Police sirens wailed in the distance, approaching rapidly. The elderly veteran who had recognized James earlier approached cautiously. "Colonel Morrison, it's an honor, sir." "Robert Wilkins, 82nd Airborne, 1991. James nodded acknowledgement. His breathing already returned to normal despite the exertion. The police arrived with expected efficiency, given the proximity to Arlington National Cemetery. For officers exited their vehicles, hands near their weapons as they assessed the scene. "What happened here?" the lead officer demanded, surveying the injured gang members and the blood-streaked veteran holding a folded flag. Before James could speak, bystanders rushed to explain. These thugs attacked him. They desecrated a flag. They hit him with a pipe. The officer looked skeptical until the elderly veteran stepped forward. "Officer, I'm Robert Wilkins, retired Master Sergeant. This is Colonel James Morrison, former Delta Force commander. These men assaulted him and his wife and desecrated a memorial flag." The mention of Delta Force changed the officer's demeanor. He studied James with new respect. "Sir, are you injured? We have paramedics incoming." James shook his head slightly. "I've had worse paper cuts." Despite his calm words, blood still trickled from his temple. The officers began detaining the gang members, who offered no resistance now. Derek, being handcuffed despite his injury, stared at James with mixture of hate and grudging respect. "You could have killed us," he said quietly as an officer led him toward a patrol car. "That was never the objective," James replied. Sarah retrieved her purse and rejoined her husband, producing a small first aid kit. After decades as a military nurse, she was never unprepared. She began cleaning his wound with practiced efficiency. 7 stitches, I think, she assessed clinically. James smiled slightly. "You said 5 the time in Kabul." "That was a cleaner cut," she replied, applying pressure to wound. The crowd slowly dispersed as police took statements from witnesses. Many approached James before leaving, offering handshakes or simple nods of respect. Several veterans rendered salutes. James and Sarah declined ambulance transport after a field dressing was applied. They had dinner reservations to keep. Thursday was their anniversary. James and Sarah walked slowly away from the memorial park, his arm around her shoulders, hers around his waist. The folded flag was tucked securely under his free arm, the Purple Heart safely in his pocket once more. 43 years, Sarah said softly as they walked, and still standing for what's right. James shook his head slightly. I wasn't trying to be a hero, just respecting what the flag represents. Sacrifice that most people will never understand. A young boy ran up to them, perhaps 10 years old, his father following close behind. "Excuse me, sir," the boy said, slightly out of breath. "My dad said you were in Delta Force. Is that true?" James knelt to the boy's level, grimacing slightly as his knees reminded him of his age. "The real heroes don't come home, son. Their names are on that wall back there. Remember them, not me." The father, reaching them, extended his hand. "Thank you for your service, sir, and for the lesson you taught all of us today." As they continued walking, Sarah squeezed his hand. "You made an impression back there. Those young men might think differently about veterans now." James remained silent for several steps. Finally, he said, "Our society has forgotten what respect means. Not just a flag or veterans, but for each other. What happened today? People watching violence and doing nothing. That's the real crisis we face." Near their car, an elderly woman approached them. "Sir, I recorded what happened. People need to see this, to remember the values our veterans fought for." James nodded once. If sharing it helps one person understand, then it served a purpose. The incident would be online within hours, shared thousands of times. Some would debate his actions. Others would celebrate them. But the message would spread. Respect isn't optional, and appearances can be deceiving. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear faded veteran caps and carry the invisible weight of service most civilians will never comprehend. What would you have done in James's situation? Have you ever witnessed someone disrespecting military symbols or veterans? Share your thoughts below and help spread this important message of respect for those who served.